Osaka Station. Midnight. The summer rain fell in sheets, drenching the city and washing away the sins of its streets. The Shinkansen glided in, a sleek bullet of steel and promise. I boarded, clutching my worn-out suitcase, seeking solace in the whispers of the rails. The platform's hum faded, replaced by the silent anticipation of a journey to Tokyo, a journey away from shadows chasing me through the alleyways of Osaka. Car 7, seat 12B. I slid into my seat, my eyes drawn to the woman beside me. She was a vision against the night, long, raven black hair clinging to her face, still wet from the rain. Her oversized slit t-shirt hung loosely on her slender frame, slightly damp and clinging in places. Her white shorts were so small they seemed to defy the conservative nature of her culture. She didn't look at me. Her gaze was fixed on the blurred landscape beyond the window. We didn't speak. The hum of the train and the rhythmic clack of wheels on tracks were our only companions. Tokyo loomed ahead, an enigmatic metropolis full of dreams and danger. Her hand rested on the armrest between us, delicate and pale. Mine was inches away, rough and scarred from years of scrapes and narrow escapes. The distance between our hands was a chasm of unspoken words, electric with the tension of the unknown. The train lurched slightly as it picked up speed. Our hands brushed. A spark. A whisper of skin against skin. She didn't pull away, neither did I. Faint notes of jazz music bled through her headphones, mingling with the steady rhythm of the train. It was Miles Davis, a haunting trumpet line that matched the midnight mood. I could hear her breathing, each breath a soft sigh against the backdrop of our silent communion. Her breathing quickened, a subtle but intimate sound that sent a shiver down my spine. I had only been in Japan for 2 days, a tourist lost in translation and the maze of Osaka's streets. Not knowing a word of Japanese, I preferred to stay silent, unsure of what to say even if I had the words. This journey was my escape, my way of finding clarity in the chaos. The woman beside me was a mystery, a fleeting connection in a foreign land. Time became a murky river, flowing past without form. I stole glances at her reflection in the window. Her face was serene, yet there was a storm brewing behind her eyes. A story untold, much like mine. Another lurch, another touch. This time, her fingers lingered. My heart pounded like the pistons driving us forward. The world outside was a blur, a smear of lights and shadows, but inside this carriage, time slowed to the beat of our breaths. She slipped off her shoes and set them by the air vent to dry. Her bare feet rested lightly on the floor, toes curling occasionally as if testing the coolness of the train's air conditioning. The moonlight caught the edge of her t-shirt, revealing more than she intended. A glimpse of skin, smooth and inviting. My mind wandered, conjuring a life where words were unnecessary, where a touch was enough. Her hand moved deliberately now, fingers intertwining with mine. It was a connection forged in silence, stronger than any conversation. We were two souls adrift, finding solace in a touch as fleeting as a dream. Osaka fell away behind us, a city of secrets left in the dark. Tokyo approached, a new beginning or another ending. I wasn't sure. The journey was our story, written in the language of touches and silences. As the first light of dawn painted the horizon, the train began to slow. Tokyo Station awaited, bustling with life. She turned to me for the first time, her eyes meeting mine. There was a promise there, something deeper than words could convey. We stood, our hands parted reluctantly. She walked ahead, a ghostly figure in white shorts and an oversized t-shirt, blending into the crowd. I followed, but the connection was already fading, the magic of the journey dissipating in the morning light. The city swallowed her, and I was left with the memory of her touch, a fleeting, electric connection on a midnight train from Osaka to Tokyo. In the end, we were just travelers, passing through each other's lives like the cities flashing by the Shinkansen's windows. If our tales captivate your senses, give us a like to show your appreciation. And don't vanish into the night without a trace. Share your thoughts with us. Yuto, a fresh graduate and self-proclaimed low-level protagonist in the game of life, found himself caught in the chaotic rush hour of Osaka. With his disheveled hair, rumpled suit from job interviews, and a hopeful glint in his eyes, he clung to the handrail above like a knight grasping his sword in the final battle. The city's pulse, a relentless rhythm of neon and shadow, surrounded him like the vast overworld in Chrono Trigger. Outside, the rain poured down, turning the city into a shimmering, wet labyrinth. The train car was packed, a suffocating press of bodies that felt like facing a final boss fight with only beginner's gear. It was the rainy season, and the windows of the train were steamed, adding to the oppressive atmosphere and blurring the outside world into a watercolor haze. The train pulled into Shinsebashi Station, and Yuto clung to a silent hope that some of the crowd would spill out onto the platform. A few did, but the respite was brief. More people surged in, locking them into the press even tighter, like a sealed dungeon entrance. The humid air, mixed with the scent of damp clothes, felt like a stifling fog spell enveloping the car. It was then he noticed her. She was a striking figure, her black hair cascading almost to her waist like an obsidian waterfall, framing the shoulders of her green blouse. She stood in front of him, absorbed in her Nintendo Switch. Her presence was reminiscent of Tifa from Final Fantasy, exuding a quiet strength and captivating beauty. A short black skirt clung to her curves, while her mint-colored shoes peeked out from beneath the hem. The crowd had positioned them so that he was pressed against her back, like an unintentional close-quarters combat scenario. He tried to look away, to escape the awkwardness. She didn't seem to notice, focused intently on her game. Yet as the train swayed, he found himself pressed against her. His eyes darted to an ad for the new Final Fantasy Remake Part 2 on the wall, his heart pounding with the rhythm of the train like a battle theme. The steam on the windows intensified, creating an intimate, enclosed world around them. She shifted slightly and he broke into a sweat, knowing she would notice soon. But nothing. She continued playing, seemingly unaware. Or was she? The thought gnawed at him as he tried to turn away, but the crowd held him in place like an unavoidable cutscene. Then, a shock, a hand turning him back toward her. She hadn't turned to look at him yet, her focus still on the screen. The realization hit him like a limit break. It was her hand that had pulled him back. She was aware, and she wanted this. The message was clear, in the silent language of touch and movement. He moved with the car, pressing against her, feeling her press back like two characters locked in a sync move. Around them, the sea of people was oblivious, like NPCs in an MMO, lost in their own scripted routines. It was just the two of them in this crowded car, communicating without words. He let go of the rail with one hand, sliding it down to squeeze her lightly. She inhaled sharply, pressing back against him. They were together in the crush, shuddering with each movement of the train, uncaring of the world around them. The train whined as it pulled into the next station, and they arranged themselves just in time. The doors opened, and people began to file out. Finally, she turned around, her blue eyes meeting his for the first time. The contrast of her blue contacts against her unmistakable Japanese features struck him like a plot twist. Her expression was calm and neutral, but a flicker of amusement danced in her eyes. Then she walked out with the others, leaving him in the tide of humanity. Yuto stood there, astonished. He had conquered his first real-life quest, feeling like the protagonist who had just unlocked a hidden achievement. The moment felt surreal, as if he had finally leveled up in his own story. This was where the final credits would roll, with the neon lights of Osaka casting a soft glow on his face, like the end screen of a long, arduous game. Midnight Delivery, a Noir rhyme. In neon-lit Yokohama, where shadows sway, Hiroshi rides his ninja through the city's fray, a pizza in hand, warmth in a box, to a towering complex past the city's clocks. At midnight, the elevator hums up to 12:07, where destiny drums. The door creaks open, revealing a sight, a woman, a geisha in the pale moonlight. Her nightgown sheer like mist on a hill, her beauty timeless gave him a chill. "It's cold tonight," she murmured low, her eyes like the night with a haunting glow. He handed her the pizza, fingers brushed, a fleeting touch in the midnight hush. "Good night," she whispered, a voice like a song, and with a click, the moment was gone. Back to his ninja, his steadfast steed, the only love he'd ever need. He rides through the night under the city's glow, a memory of beauty in the jazz's flow. In neon-lit Yokohama where shadows play, a delivery man rides into the fray. With a heart full of echoes and a mind full of dreams, lost in the city's noir and its midnight schemes. Shadows of the Arcade in Shinsaibashi, Osaka. In the heart of Shinsaibashi, amidst the rain-soaked streets and the flickering neon lights, lay an arcade that served as a sanctuary for gamers and dreamers alike. The air inside was thick with the scent of nostalgia, a mix of old electronics and spilled soda, while the rhythmic beeping and flashing screens created a hypnotic symphony that drowned out the world outside. Asai Jackpot Yamada, a man with an enigmatic aura and a wit sharper than the edge of a blade, sat poised at an arcade cabinet, his eyes fixed on the glowing screen before him, a lit cigarette resting in an ashtray nearby. The soft glow from the cabinet cast shadows on his face, highlighting the intensity of his concentration. As the rain tapped a rhythmic melody against the arcade's windows, the door swung open, and in stepped a young woman, her face streaked with tears, her eyes shimmering with unshed emotion. The patrons of the arcade turned their heads, their gazes drawn to her presence as she moved further into the room. Despite her disheveled appearance, there was a quiet strength to her as she approached Asahi, a haunting beauty that captivated all who beheld her. She couldn't have been more than 19, with delicate features framed by cascading waves of ebony hair that fell in disarray around her shoulders. Her eyes, dark as the night sky, held a depth of emotion far beyond her years, a silent testament to the pain she carried within her. She was dressed in a black sport dress, paired with sport shoes boasting a raised platform that added height to her frame, accentuating her presence in the room. The neon lights reflected off the wet pavement outside, casting an ethereal glow that seeped into the arcade, creating a surreal atmosphere. "Excuse me," she spoke, her voice trembling with emotion. "Are you Asai Yamada?" Asai's eyes widened in surprise at the sight before him. "Yeah, that's me," he replied, his voice soft with concern. "Are you okay?" She didn't answer his question directly, instead diverting the conversation to the arcade cabinet in the corner that housed Street Fighter II Turbo. "I hear you're quite the legend around here," she said, her tone slightly shaky but determined. Care to show me what you've got? Asahi hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to make of the woman's sudden change in demeanor, but he nodded nonetheless, a flicker of curiosity igniting within him. As she approached, she noticed the lit cigarette in the ashtray beside him, and with a graceful gesture she reached out and extinguished it, a silent sign of respect. As they made their way to the Street Fighter cabinet, the air seemed to thicken with anticipation. The arcade's fluorescent lights flickered intermittently, casting an almost ghostly pallor over the scene. Asahi couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the woman's story than met the eye. They exchanged casual banter as they walked, but beneath the surface, a silent understanding passed between them, a recognition of shared pain and hidden secrets. Once they reached the cabinet, Asahi selected his character with a practiced hand, while the woman observed with a mixture of sadness and determination. As the game began, their fingers danced across the buttons, each move executed with a precision born of years of practice. With each round, the woman's confidence grew, her tears replaced by a fierce determination to win. The sounds of their battle, sharp clicks, the hum of the machine, and the occasional exclamations blended with the ambient noise of the arcade, creating a unique soundtrack to their encounter. Finally, after several intense matches, they paused to catch their breath, the arcade's lights casting long shadows across the room. Asahi turned to the woman, a question burning on his lips. "How did you become so good at this game?" he asked, his voice gentle but curious. For a moment there was silence, the air heavy with unspoken emotions. As she walked towards the exit, she stopped at the doorway, her gaze lingering on Asahi's face. "My dad used to love this game," she replied, her voice barely above a murmur. Asahi's heart ached at her words, a pang of empathy stirring within him. He reached out a hand, a silent gesture of comfort and understanding. And as she stood framed in the doorway, her gaze locked with his, Asahi knew that their meeting was no mere coincidence, but the beginning of a bond forged in the depths of sorrow and the flickering glow of the arcade lights. The rain continued to pour outside, creating a soft, steady rhythm that seemed to echo the unresolved emotions hanging in the air. As the woman disappeared into the night, Asahi remained standing, the soft hum of the arcade machines around him, a reminder of the fleeting yet profound connection they had shared. If our tales captivate your senses, give us a like to show your appreciation. And don't vanish into the night without a trace. Share your thoughts with us. Stay tuned, stay curious, and let the jazz keep playing. Kenzo had always envisioned his move to Kyoto as a leap into the unknown, a stark departure from the quiet rhythms of the countryside. His new apartment, perched on the third floor of an old, brooding building in the heart of the city, was a labyrinth of shadows and half-light, the kind of place where secrets seemed to linger in the corners and the air felt heavy with untold stories. As he unpacked the last of his belongings, a sense of disquiet settled over him. The walls, painted a deep shade of gray, seemed to absorb the sparse light from the paper lanterns outside, casting long, languid shadows across the room. The wooden floors creaked underfoot, a constant reminder of the history embedded within the building. The clock struck midnight, and Kenzo decided to take a break. He stepped out onto the balcony, seeking a breath of the cool night air. The city stretched out before him, a sea of twinkling lights and distant murmurs. The courtyard below was a patchwork of darkness and pale light, the kind of place where whispers and hushed conversations might be exchanged under the cover of night. It was then that he saw her. On the balcony beside his, a woman stood with her back to him. Her presence was a stark contrast to the muted surroundings. She wore a long, thin red dress that clung to her curves, shimmering slightly in the dim light. The dress was unzipped, exposing the smooth expanse of her back, and one strap hung loosely off her shoulder, teetering on the edge of falling. The sight was both intimate and arresting, as if he had stumbled upon a private moment suspended in time. She raised an e-cigarette to her lips, the soft blue glow a brief, ethereal contrast to the darkness. Her hair, a cascade of dark waves, tumbled down her back, further highlighting the exposed skin. As she exhaled, the vapor curled and dissipated into the night air, adding to the surreal quality of the scene. Kenzo found himself unable to look away. There was something mesmerizing about her, a dangerous allure that pulled at him. She turned slightly, revealing her profile, high cheekbones, almond-shaped eyes that hinted at untold stories, and full lips painted a deep, sultry red. Her skin was smooth and porcelain-like, a flawless canvas that seemed to capture the moonlight. There was an intriguing blend in her appearance. She looked predominantly Japanese, yet with an undercurrent of warmth and passion, reminiscent of a sun-kissed sunset on distant shores. Their eyes met across the void. Her expression was inscrutable, a mixture of boredom and something else, something darker that Kenzo couldn't quite place. Her gaze held his, conveying a silent message he couldn't decipher. "Sayaka, come here!" A man's voice suddenly cut through the night, harsh and commanding. She turned her head slightly, but not before giving Kenzo one last lingering look. Her eyes held his, a fleeting connection that felt charged with unspoken words. With a graceful turn, she slipped back into her apartment, the strap sliding further down her arm as she disappeared inside, leaving the balcony empty and the night feeling suddenly colder. Kenzo stood there, the name echoing in his mind. Sayaka. Now he knew her name. As he stepped back inside, closing the door behind him, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had just glimpsed a fragment of a story far more complex and dangerous than he could have ever imagined. Step into the shadows and immerse yourself in the world of midnight Japan tales, where enigmatic stories are narrated with the intrigue and charm of classic detective stories. If you crave the excitement of mystery and the smooth allure of jazz, hit that subscribe button and light up your notifications like a neon sign on a rainy Tokyo night. The Midnight Encounter. The night was as black as an ink spill, save for the shimmering stars that punctuated the velvet sky. It was the kind of darkness that seemed to swallow everything whole, only to spit out the occasional glow of campfires scattered across the park. I found myself camping alone, seeking solace in the isolation and the sporadic crackle of firewood burning. The flames danced like ghosts in the breeze, their warmth a welcome reprieve from the chill that crept through the air. I was lost in the symphony of nature, the chirping of crickets, the rustling of leaves, when I saw her. She appeared from the shadows like an apparition in the moonlight. She moved with a grace that seemed almost otherworldly, each step deliberate and soft on the mossy ground. Her outfit was a clear indication of her inexperience. Thin leggings that clung to her legs, providing little protection against the night chill, and an oversized yoga sweatshirt that hung loosely over her frame. The sweatshirt, a pastel pink, bore the logo of a trendy fitness brand. Its sleeves rolled up to her elbows. She wore a pair of bright white tennis shoes, looking as if they were fresh out of the box. Her hair cascaded over her shoulders in loose waves, as dark as the sky above, but with a luster that shimmered with each movement. As she drew closer, the firelight revealed her features. Her skin was fair, almost luminescent, and her eyes, oh, those eyes were a deep, soulful brown, framed by long, dark lashes. There was a beauty in her that was raw and natural, untouched by the artifices of the modern world. She had an aura of both strength and fragility, like a wildflower growing through the cracks of an abandoned city. I stood up, brushing the dirt from my jeans, and greeted her with a nod. She smiled, a small, hesitant smile that didn't quite reach her eyes but was enough to light up her face. "Hi," she began, her voice soft yet clear against the backdrop of night sounds. "I'm sorry to bother you, but I can't seem to start my fire. Could you help me?" "Of course," I replied, grabbing my flashlight and gesturing for her to lead the way. "Show me where your camp is." She guided me through the dimly lit park, the path illuminated by the soft glow of my flashlight. Her camp was a small, modest setup with a tent that looked barely used and a pile of firewood that remained untouched. I could see the frustration in her eyes as she looked at the unlit fire pit. "Let's get this going," I said, kneeling down and arranging the wood. I explained each step as I went along, showing her how to build a proper structure for the fire. With a few strikes of the flint, sparks caught on the kindling, and soon enough a small flame began to grow. Her face lit up with relief and gratitude. "Thank you so much," she said, her voice warm with appreciation. "You're welcome," I replied, standing up and brushing the dirt off my hands. "It can be tricky the first few times. Mind if I stay for a bit?" "Not at all," she said, smiling. "Please, stay." We settled down by the newly built fire, its flames casting a warm glow on our faces. The crackling of the fire filled the silence as we both got comfortable. The flames threw flickering shadows on her face, highlighting her delicate features and the hint of a smirk playing on her lips. "You come here often?" she asked, her eyes fixed on the fire. "Actually, I live nearby. This park is like a second home to me. Just needed to get away for a bit," I said, trying to sound casual. She nodded, as if she understood completely. "I'm trying this out for the first time. Saw an article in a magazine about the benefits of camping and thought I'd give it a shot." I looked up, following her gaze to the stars. They seemed brighter out here, away from the suffocating glow of city lights. The constellations were sharp and vivid, telling their ancient stories in silence. "So, what brings you out here?" I asked, turning my attention back to her. She hesitated for a moment, then sighed softly. "I'm practicing for a camping trip with my boyfriend. He's really into this kind of thing, and I wanted to make sure I could keep up." There was a hint of vulnerability in her voice, and I felt a pang of sympathy. "Camping isn't easy," I said, but it sounds like you're doing great. She smiled, a little more genuinely this time. Thanks. I just want to make him happy, you know? I nodded, understanding all too well the lengths we'd go for those we cared about. I'm sure he appreciates it, I said softly. She looked at me, curiosity evident in her eyes. So, why are you out here alone? I hesitated, then decided to share. Let's just say I needed some time to think. Sometimes things at home can get complicated. Her expression softened. I'm sorry to hear that. Sometimes a change of scenery can help. I looked at her, taking in the warmth of her presence, and she noticed. Her eyes met mine, and for a moment the silence between us was filled with a quiet understanding. The firelight reflected in her eyes, creating a connection that felt almost tangible. The firelight created a cozy ambiance, and as she stood up to stretch, the light illuminated her perfect silhouette. The shape of her body against the fire was almost mesmerizing, casting long shadows that danced on the ground. As the fire dwindled to glowing embers, the night grew colder, but her presence was a warmth that stayed with me. When the first light of dawn began to break, I stood up, brushing the dirt off my jeans. I should get back, I said, a hint of regret in my voice. Thanks for the company. It was nice talking to you. She smiled, her eyes twinkling in the early morning light. With that, I disappeared into the fading darkness, leaving her with the promise of another encounter in the memory of a night spent under the stars. Jack had always been a man of curiosity, a trait that served him well as a freelance photographer. His latest trip to Japan had been a mix of planned shoots and spontaneous adventures, but nothing could have prepared him for the events of this evening. As the closing hour of the Osaka Skyview Tower approached, the once crowded observation deck had emptied out, leaving Jack with a rare moment of solitude. He'd heard whispers from fellow travelers about the incredible views from the tower's bathrooms, a peculiar detail that piqued his interest. Determined to capture every unique angle of the city, he decided to investigate. The men's room lived up to the hype. Large, floor-to-ceiling windows offered an unfiltered view of Osaka's sprawling cityscape, a glittering mosaic of lights stretching to the horizon. Jack snapped a few photos, satisfied with his finds. But his curiosity wasn't sated. He wanted to see if the view from the women's bathroom offered an equally captivating scene. He approached the door to the women's room, hesitating for a moment. "Hello? Anyone in here?" he called out, his voice echoing slightly in the empty corridor. Receiving no response, he cautiously pushed the door open and stepped inside. The scene that greeted him was nothing short of surreal. A large window was shattered, shards of glass scattered across the floor, glinting like diamonds in the dim light. By the shattered window stood a woman in profile, her hair streaked with ethereal black and silver strands fluttering in the breeze. She had a slim build and ghostly pale skin that, in the moment, seemed almost translucent, as if the shock and fear had drained the color from her. She was dressed in a black short pencil skirt and a matching blazer coat, her professional attire contrasting sharply with the disarray of her makeup and the chaos around her. Her shoulders shook with silent sobs, and the remnants of her makeup trailed down her cheeks, telling a story of recent tears. Jack's heart pounded in his chest. He took a step forward, unsure of what to say or do. "Are you all right?" he finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The woman turned slightly, her tear-streaked face revealing a mixture of fear and desperation. Before she could respond, the distant wail of police sirens filled the air, growing louder by the second. Jack's mind raced. How had he not heard the glass shatter? And the most chilling question of all, had someone fallen through the window? The woman's gaze flickered to the door, then back to Jack. "You need to leave," she said, her voice trembling. "They can't find you here." "Why? What happened?" Jack asked, but she shook her head, backing away from him. "Please, just go. Trust me." The urgency in her voice propelled Jack into action. He turned and hurried out of the bathroom, his thoughts a chaotic jumble of confusion and fear. As he reached the emergency exit right by the bathrooms, he glanced back one last time, seeing the woman's silhouette against the shattered window, a lone figure against the backdrop of a city that seemed suddenly alien and threatening. Descending the stairs two at a time, Jack's mind grappled with the surreal encounter. What had he stumbled into? The sirens were almost deafening now. He slipped out the emergency exit, blending into the night as he made his way down the street. His camera, still clutched in his hand, felt heavier than usual. He'd come to Osaka in search of unique perspectives, but what he'd found was a puzzle with pieces that didn't quite fit. As he ducked into a nearby alley, the neon lights casting eerie reflections on the wet pavement, he reviewed the photos he'd taken, hoping for some clue that would make sense of the evening's events. There, in the last shot from the men's room, he noticed something he hadn't seen before. A reflection in the window. Just a faint outline, but unmistakably the figure of a woman with black hair streaked with silver strands. She'd been there all along, watching him. Determined to uncover the truth, Jack knew he couldn't let this mystery go. The woman's haunted eyes and the unanswered questions pulled at him, driving him deeper into a labyrinth of intrigue and danger. If you crave the thrill of mystery and the smooth allure of jazz, hit that subscribe button and light up your notifications like a neon sign on a rainy Tokyo night. Yuto Nakamura, a hiker and photographer from Kobe, had always been drawn to the serene beauty of Japan's untouched landscapes. His latest journey led him to Daisen, a volcanic mountain in Tottori Prefecture, part of the Daisenoki National Park. Known for its lush forests and rich biodiversity, this place blurred the line between the ordinary and the mystical. The climb had been uneventful but enjoyable. Yuto relished the tranquility of the forest, the rustle of leaves underfoot, and the distant calls of birds. There was only one moment that stood out, a rare white fox that scurried away before he could capture its image, disappearing into the underbrush like a ghost. As twilight settled, Yuto set up his camera for a time-lapse, aiming to capture the vast expanse of the forest, the endless sky, and his solitary tent, a mere speck in the frame. The night was unusually bright, illuminated by a full moon so radiant that he had to close the aperture to let less light into the camera, a rare move for nighttime photography. Satisfied with the setup, he retreated to his tent, the forest's nocturnal symphony lulling him into a deep sleep. In the dead of night, a piercing howl jolted Yuto awake. The sound echoing through the trees was eerie and haunting. His heart pounded as he sat up, peering into the moonlit landscape outside his tent. The howl had unsettled him deeply. Trying to shake off the unease, Yuto decided to check his camera. He stepped into the cool night air, eyes scanning the surroundings. The full moon provided enough light to see clearly without a flashlight. The darkness revealed nothing unusual, and his camera remained standing, capturing the night as planned. He sighed with relief and returned to his tent, hoping to find solace in sleep once more. As he was about to drift off, a closer, more piercing howl shattered the silence, followed by aggressive growls and the sounds of a struggle. His heart raced as the growls and rustling continued outside his tent. Yuto lay frozen, the sounds of the fight sending chills down his spine. Minutes passed, and the fight seemed to subside, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. Summoning his courage, Yuto slowly peeked out of his tent. The moonlit night was clear enough to navigate without a flashlight. He scanned the area and saw his camera, previously steady and reliable, knocked over on the ground. Dread pooled in his stomach as he approached the fallen equipment. Yuto picked up the camera and immediately began reviewing the photos on the small screen. The first few frames showed the serene night, stars twinkling against the dark canvas of the sky. Then his breath caught. A large black bear had wandered into the clearing, its presence both majestic and menacing. The bear lingered near his tent, inspecting it with a curious yet dangerous air before it knocked over the camera. He continued scrolling through the images, his fingers trembling slightly. Suddenly, he saw something that made his blood run cold. There, standing at the edge of the clearing, was a woman in a white kimono. One shoulder was bare, revealing skin as pale as moonlight, contrasting sharply with her traditional attire. Her grayish hair was tied in a long ponytail that swayed gently as if touched by an unseen breeze. She stared directly into the lens, her eyes filled with a mix of sorrow and curiosity. To his horror, he noticed a bleeding wound on her exposed shoulder and her feet, crimson against her pale skin. Yuto's mind spun with questions. Who was she? A wandering spirit, a lost soul, or something else entirely? A shiver ran down his spine, the air around him heavy with the weight of the unknown. The woman remained in just a single frame, her presence fleeting, as if she had materialized for the briefest of moments before fading back into the ether. Yuto glanced around, half expecting to see her among the trees, but the clearing was empty, the only movement the gentle sway of leaves. His heart still pounding, Yuto quickly packed his belongings. The sense of being watched intensified, and he knew he couldn't stay any longer. Every sound in the forest seemed to echo with unseen threats. As he looked back one last time, far away, almost out of sight, was the white fox. It seemed like its shoulder and right paw were bleeding. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, it disappeared out of sight. Back in the safety of civilization, the images replayed in his thoughts, each one a piece of a puzzle he couldn't solve. The black bear, the enigmatic woman, they were now part of his story, an unspoken mystery that haunted his every step. Yuto knew he would return to Daisen Oki National Park, drawn by the allure of the unknown, seeking answers to the questions that now filled his soul. But for now, he left the forest behind, carrying with him a sense of wonder and a whisper of something beyond the realm of the everyday. Step into the shadows and immerse yourself in a world of midnight Japan tales, where enigmatic stories are narrated with the intrigue and charm of classic detective stories. If you crave the excitement of mystery and the smooth allure of jazz, hit that subscribe button and light up your notifications like a neon sign on a rainy Tokyo night. Whispering silence at the Shinto shrine. The rain had just begun to taper off as Jack Monroe, a seasoned photographer, found himself wandering through the narrow streets of Kyoto. His assignment was simple: capture the essence of the city's ancient beauty. But the damp, glistening cobblestones led him astray, and he stumbled upon a Shinto shrine nestled quietly behind a veil of towering trees. The shrine was a relic of time, its wooden structures weathered but enduring. Jack, ever the opportunist, readied his camera, eager to immortalize the serenity of the moment. He moved with silent purpose, his lens sweeping over the ornate details of the Torii Gate and the intricate carvings of the Honden. As he adjusted his focus, he saw her, a woman standing near the altar, her presence almost ghostly. She was draped in the traditional shozoku worn by Shinto priests. The white fabric, dampened by the rain, clung to her figure like a spectral veil, offering fleeting glimpses of her form beneath, as if she were both there and not, a wraith of wet silk and mist. Despite this, she seemed unfazed, her eyes dark and mysterious, beckoning him closer. Jack's heart skipped a beat. He wasn't one to be easily spooked, but there was something undeniably otherworldly about her. He raised his camera, capturing her in a series of clicks, each shot more mesmerizing than the last. She moved with a grace that seemed almost choreographed. Oddly enough, she was sweeping the steps with methodical precision, an incongruous task given the late hour and the persistent rain. Drawn inexplicably, Jack found himself nearing the altar. He had forgotten the rule: never cross the line between observer and participant. But in the stillness, his hand moved of its own accord. He reached into his pocket, retrieved a 50-yen coin, and dropped it into the offering box, the metallic clink echoing softly in the quiet. He bowed his head, whispering an unbidden prayer to the spirits of the place. When he lifted his head, the woman was gone. Panic flared briefly, replaced by a bewildering calm. Had she been real? He scanned the grounds, but there was no trace of her, no footprints in the damp earth, no rustle of retreating footsteps. Heart pounding, Jack reviewed the photos on his camera. Each image was marred, distorted by streaks of light and dark patches. The shots of the woman were the worst, mere smudges where her figure should have been. He frowned, checking the settings, the battery, the lens. Everything was in order. The corruption seemed deliberate, as if the camera had captured more than it was meant to. The rain began anew, its rhythm a soft percussion against the leaves. Jack slung his camera over his shoulder, his mind a whirl of questions. Had she been a figment of his imagination, a trick of the light and rain? As he walked away from the shrine, the city lights flickering in the distance, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had brushed against something not of this world. His photographs, once meant to capture beauty, now held a mystery he could never hope to unravel. The memory of the woman at the shrine lingered, a haunting presence in the back of his mind. And somewhere in the depths of his camera, amid the corrupted files, lay the evidence of his encounter with the beautiful, ghost-like woman who vanished without a trace. The claw machine. The neon lights of Shinjuku's arcades flickered like whispers in the Tokyo night, casting their electric glow on rain-slicked streets. It was a world of color and sound, a labyrinth of sensory overload that both intrigued and disoriented. In the heart of this urban maze stood a man, his thick Montbell hiking jacket dark and heavy against the drizzle. To us foreigners, he looked like an average 20-something Japanese man, blending into the crowd yet standing apart with a quiet intensity, his eyes shadowed with the weight of unspoken stories. He found solace in the arcades, where the chaotic symphony of clinking coins and electronic beeps drowned out his thoughts. Tonight was no different. He weaved through the crowd, his eyes scanning the room with practiced indifference. It was then he saw her. She stood by a claw machine, a beacon of elegance amid the flashing lights and cacophony. Her hair, a striking shade of silver gray, cascaded in soft waves over her shoulders, catching the fluorescent hues and shimmering like silk. Her eyes, a shade of green that seemed almost unreal, focused intently on the machine. She wore a summer dress, light and airy, its fabric fluttering around her knees with each movement. The dress was a stark, almost jarring contrast to the winter chill outside. Tokyo's biting cold seemed to have no effect on her, as if the icy air dared not touch her porcelain skin. Intrigued, he approached, his footsteps swallowed by the din. He watched as she maneuvered the claw, her brow furrowing in concentration. The claw descended, grasping at the toy, only to drop it at the last moment. A soft sigh escaped her lips. She muttered in Russian, though he didn't understand the word. "Need a hand?" he asked, his voice low and rough from too many cigarettes and too many sleepless nights. She turned to him, those green eyes locking onto his with a mixture of surprise and amusement. "You think you can do better?" He shrugged, a half smile playing on his lips. "Worth a shot." She stepped aside, allowing him access to the controls. He could feel her eyes on him, studying him as he studied the machine. With a practiced hand, he guided the claw, his movements precise and calculated. The claw descended, clamped onto the toy, and lifted it slowly, almost teasingly, towards the chute. For a moment it seemed like it might fall, but then it dropped, the toy tumbling into the prize bin. He retrieved the toy and handed it to her with a small flourish. "Here you go. A gift from the machine." She took it, her fingers brushing against his. "Thank you. I'm Lara." He nodded. "Nice to meet you, Lara. I'm just passing through." "Just passing through?" she echoed, her accent softening the words, adding a melodic quality to them. "Sounds lonely," he chuckled, a sound devoid of real mirth. "It has its moments." They stood there, an island of calm in the sea of chaos, each studying the other. There was something about her, something that drew him in and made him want to know more. But in a city like Tokyo, everyone had their secrets, and he was no exception. "So, what brings you here?" he asked, breaking the silence. Lara looked down at the toy in her hands, her expression unreadable. Sometimes you just need a distraction. He understood that all too well. The arcades, with their noise and light, were perfect for losing oneself, if only for a while. "Well, you found one." She smiled, a real smile that lit up her face and made her eyes sparkle. "Yes, I suppose I did." They talked for a while longer, the conversation flowing easily despite the noise around them. She had a way of making him forget, if only for a moment, the weight he carried. As they spoke, he couldn't help but notice how the thin straps of her dress slipped over her shoulders, exposing more of her skin to the winter air. Yet, she never shivered or showed any sign of discomfort. It was as if she existed in her own season, untouched by the cold reality around them. "Do you want to get a coffee?" he asked, not wanting the night to end. Lara hesitated, a flicker of something dark crossing her eyes. Maybe another time." He nodded, understanding that some things were better left unsaid. "All right. Another time." She gave him one last smile, then turned and disappeared into the crowd, leaving him standing alone once more. The neon lights flickered overhead, and the rain continued to fall, each drop a tiny reminder of the passage of time. As he walked away from the arcade, he couldn't shake the feeling that he just missed something important. But in a city like Tokyo, moments were fleeting, and connections were often as transient as the neon lights. Step into the shadows and immerse yourself in the world of Midnight Japan tales, where enigmatic stories are narrated with the intrigue and charm of classic detective stories. If you crave the excitement of mystery and the smooth allure of jazz, hit that subscribe button and light up your notifications like a neon sign on a rainy Tokyo night. Taka walked through the rain-soaked alley, the neon lights casting a shadowy glow. He had been wandering the streets for an hour, passing by fast food joints and chain restaurants that felt as lifeless as the gray pavement beneath his feet. He was looking for something special, something to break the monotony. Just as he was about to give up, a small, nondescript ramen shop caught his eye. The sign was faded, but the inviting scent of miso and soy called to him like a siren's song. He pushed open the door, stepping into the dimly lit, intimate space. Behind the counter stood a beautiful young woman, her dark hair tied back, her eyes bright and curious, like stars in a midnight sky. She moved with the grace of a dancer, each motion precise and deliberate. Take took a seat, and their eyes met, her gaze both inviting and mysterious, like a whispered secret. "What can I get for you?" she asked, her voice a soft melody. "Ramen," Take replied, his voice low and gravelly. "And a beer." She nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of her lips, like the first light of dawn. As she worked, he watched her, mesmerized by her delicate hands moving with skill and care, like an artist crafting a masterpiece. The steam from the pot rose around her, creating an ethereal halo. Every so often she glanced at him, their eyes meeting in brief but intense moments of connection, like electric sparks in the dark. Take sipped his beer, feeling the cool liquid calm his nerves. The room was filled with a warm, inviting glow, but the heat from the steaming pot became too much. She unbuttoned the top button of her shirt, revealing a glimpse of her smooth, porcelain skin. Take couldn't help but stare, mesmerized by the simple, seductive act. His heart raced, the anticipation building with each passing moment. When she placed the bowl before him, it was more than just food. It was a symphony of flavors, each ingredient a note in a harmonious melody, prepared with love and attention. He took his first bite, the flavors exploding in his mouth, and felt her eyes on him. Their connection was electric, a silent conversation filled with unspoken desire, like two magnets drawn together. Each bite was a revelation, and each glance exchanged was a promise. The ramen was exquisite, but it was the chef's presence that truly captivated him. As he finished, he lingered, savoring not just the meal, but the intoxicating aura she exuded. An older man sitting at a corner table observed them with a knowing smile, sensing the tension in their looks. The man's wrinkled face betrayed years of wisdom, and his eyes twinkled with amusement. He watched as Taka stood up, ready to thank the chef. "Did you enjoy it?" she asked, her eyes twinkling with a knowing look, like a cat that had caught the canary. "It was perfect," Taka replied, his voice softening. She leaned in slightly, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I'm glad you liked it, Take." He smiled, the game they had been playing all evening finally revealed. This wasn't just any ramen shop, and she wasn't just any chef. She was his wife, Yuki, who had opened this little shop to fulfill her culinary dreams. In the chaos of his life, he had found a way to reconnect with her through this playful, seductive pretense. The older man chuckled softly to himself, understanding the love and playfulness between them. Take looked at Yuki, truly seeing her for the first time that night. Yuki, she smiled, a smile that was both familiar and filled with affection. See you home soon. As they embraced, the rain outside continued to fall, but inside everything felt warm and perfect. The older man finished his meal, tipping his hat to the couple as he left, grateful for the reminder that love could be found in the most unexpected places. It was a sticky summer night, the kind where the air clung to you like a desperate lover. The festival sprawled across the park, a sea of glowing lanterns and garish stalls hawking everything from candy apples to cheap trinkets. It was the last place I wanted to be, yet here I was, a freshly minted college graduate with a camera slung around my neck, hunting for the perfect shot of the fireworks. I'd never had much luck with women. 4 years of college and not a single date, let alone a girlfriend. So I stuck to what I knew, photography. The lens was my shield, my way of peering into a world that seemed perpetually out of reach. As I meandered through the festival, the crowd pressed in, a cacophony of laughter and shouted bargains. The scent of fried dough mingled with the tang of summer sweat. I was on the outskirts, aiming my camera at a particularly lively game stall when she stepped into my frame, a vision in white. She wore a yukata, simple yet exquisite, its fabric whispering against her skin in the evening breeze. The festival lights shone through, making it slightly translucent and casting delicate shadows that traced the contours of her body. Her hair, dark and glossy, cascaded down her back like a waterfall of midnight. It was Akiko, the girl every guy in my class had a crush on. She was untouchable, a goddess among mortals, and here she was, standing in front of me, inspecting a display of delicate paper fans. I lowered my camera, my heart pounding like a snare drum. Should I approach her? What could I possibly say? I swallowed hard, my throat dry as sandpaper, and took a step forward. Akiko? She turned, her eyes widening in surprise before softening into a warm smile. Kaito? I didn't expect to see you here. Her voice was melodic, each word a note in a song that tugged at something deep inside me. I forced a smile, hoping it looked more confident than I felt. Yeah, just here for the fireworks. Thought I'd get some good shots. She nodded, her gaze lingering on my camera. You've always been good with that thing. Mind if I join you? My heart nearly stopped. Sure, I'd like that. We walked together, our steps synchronizing as we made our way to a quieter spot on the hill overlooking the festival. The noise faded into a dull roar behind us, and the first fireworks shot up, exploding in a riot of colors against the night sky. I stole glances at her as I snapped photos, capturing the awe on her face as the fireworks painted her in hues of red, blue, and gold. The yukata clung to her, revealing just enough to set my pulse racing but remaining tastefully elusive. Her figure was like a perfectly composed photograph, every line and curve in harmony. A study in light and shadow that captivated the eye. Beautiful, isn't it? She murmured, not taking her eyes off the sky. Yeah, I replied, though I wasn't looking at the fireworks. She turned to me, her eyes reflecting the sparks above. I always admired you, you know? You were different, quiet but talented. You saw the world in a way no one else did. I felt a blush creep up my neck. Thanks. I never thought you noticed. She smiled, a soft, enigmatic curve of her lips. I noticed. For a moment, the world shrank to just the two of us, the festival a distant memory. I wanted to reach out, to touch her, to see if she was as real as she seemed. But fear held me back, that old familiar friend. The final fireworks burst overhead, a grand finale of light and sound. She sighed, a sound filled with 1,000 unspoken things. I should go. My family is probably looking for me. I nodded, a knot tightening in my chest. Yeah, sure. It was nice seeing you, Akiko. She stepped closer, her hand brushing mine, sending a jolt of electricity through me. It was nice seeing you too, Kaido. Maybe we can meet again sometime, without the crowd. And then she was gone, a white wraith slipping back into the festival, leaving me with the taste of her words and the lingering warmth of her touch. I stood there long after the last firework faded, the camera heavy in my hands, wondering if maybe, just maybe, my luck was starting to change.